As we get started, I'd like us to remember 3 quick words. These words are insist, desist, and persist. Insist, desist, and persist. I'd like us to look at some of the characters in the book of Job and consider their response to the whole concept of suffering. The first group of characters I'd like to consider are Job's friends. Job's friends. These are Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and Elihu. And as we consider these friends and their response to adversity, the word insist strongly comes to mind. Insist has to do with stating firmly that something is true. You state firmly that something is true. Whether it is true or not is a different case. You state firmly that it is true. During Job's time, as it is in some cultures even today, all suffering was thought to be as a result of personal sin. And because of the fact that Job suffered so heavily, his friends insisted that he must have sinned. His friends insisted that he must have done something wrong to warrant what he was going through. They insisted that he must have sinned to warrant his current predicament. And in Job chapter 4 and verse 7, one of the friends is talking, and this is what he says. Consider now, who being innocent has ever perished. Where were the upright ever destroyed? In other words, he is saying, Job, you are not as innocent as you claim to be. Otherwise, you wouldn't be suffering now. Who being innocent has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? You must have done something wrong, Job, to warrant your current predicament. That's basically what they're saying. Another friend states in chapter 8 and verse 20, surely God does not reject a blameless man or strengthen the hand of evildoers. In other words, he's saying, hey, buddy, the fact that you are suffering now means you are an evildoer. You are not as blameless as you would want us to believe. You must be an evildoer to be going through suffering. They insist. Job's friends insist that he must have done something wrong in order to get into trouble. But as much as Job's friends insist he has sinned to warrant his current predicament, Job chapter 1 and verse 1 and 8 shows that he was blameless and upright. He feared God and he shunned evil. He was blameless and upright. He feared God and he shunned evil. Dear ones, when going through challenging times, you may come across some people who have deep judgmental attitude. This group of people is often quick to condemn those who are going through adversity. They may say something like, this is why so and so is struggling. This is, why she is struggling. This is why he is struggling. He must have sinned. She must have done something wrong. She must have done this and that. He must have done this and that. I want to ask us to be careful about jumping into conclusions regarding why others are going through challenges. The second group of characters I'd like to consider are Job's wife and Satan. Job's wife and Satan. As I think of these two and their response to adversity, the word desist comes to mind. Desist. Desist has the idea of stopping to do something. You stop doing something. You desist from doing it. And Satan's goal in bringing adversity Job's way was to cause him to desist from loving the Lord, to stop living for God. That was Satan's goal. It's like, I'll bring it, and my goal is, I just hope he desists. In other words, his philosophy is adversity, trouble, challenges, pain should cause you to desist from loving the Lord. And in Job chapter 1 and verse 9 and 11, this is what the devil says. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied, have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Kindly note those last few words in verse 11. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has. And then what will happen? And he will surely curse you to your face. He will respond. If you do that, God, Job will respond by desisting from loving you. He will respond by cursing you to your face. He will stop living for you. He will desist from loving you. Chapter 2, verse 4 and verse 5. This is the devil again speaking and says, skin for skin. Satan replied, a man will give all he has for his own life. But stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. He will surely desist from loving you. Look at the tone of Job's wife, chapter 2 and verse 9. Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die. Abandon God. Leave him alone. Desist from walking with him, from living for him, from loving him. Desist. I think she had witnessed Job go through so much pain. And she's like, hey, you've suffered so much. It's not worth trusting this God who cannot keep you from suffering. Just curse God and die. Just desist from loving him and die. Just abandon him and die. She encourages him to denounce God, to renounce God, to walk away from God, so to speak. And friends, Satan's view, and by extension, that of Job's wife, is that suffering should cause one to desist from loving the Lord, from living for God. But I like the stand that Job took. Chapter 2 and verse 10. The last part of verse 10 says, in all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Yes. Dear ones, I put it to us that suffering should not cause us to desist from loving God. I put it to us that trials and temptations should not cause us to desist from living for God. Friends, no matter how dark our circumstances may grow, we must resist the temptation to desist from loving the Lord. The third character I'd like to consider is Job himself. The word that comes to mind as I think about Job's response to adversity is persist. Persist. Persist has the idea of continuing despite difficulties or opposition. You still continue. Difficulties are there. Opposition is there. But you are continuing anyway. You are persisting anyway. And so, that's what comes to mind, the word persist, as I think of his response to adversity. All hell, broke loose on Job, and he lost his health, he lost his wealth, he lost his children. Nevertheless, he continued despite the difficulties, despite the opposition. He continued trusting God. He persisted in his faith. Unlike his friends who insisted he must have sinned, and his wife who suggested that he desists from loving God, Job persists in his faith. And chapter 1 and verse 20 shows that right after receiving news about the loss of his children, this is what he says. Job got up, verse 20 of chapter 1, tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground and worshipped. He just falls to the ground and worships. What a response. Wow. What a response to adversity. Worship. I'm going to persist anyway. You may insist that I must have done something wrong. I know I haven't done something wrong. Hey, you may try to challenge me to desist from loving the Lord, but I'm not going to do that. I will persist in loving Him. I will even worship Him when things are not working out for me. So despite the ordeal, he persists in his faith and remains true to God. Yes, he seems to complain as he asks God and those around some tough questions. Yet even in his complaints, he never abandons his commitment to God. He determined to continue trusting God even during his most vulnerable time. In chapter 13 and verse 15, the first part of verse 15 of chapter 13 of Job, he declares, listen to this, though he slay me, though you, God, may kill me, in other words, yet I will trust in Him. Yet I will hope in Him. What an expression of persistence. Yes, I'm going through a hard moment. Things are not working out for me. My friends are, insisting that I must have sinned. Those, even my wife is challenging me to desist from loving the Lord. But I'm going to persist in my faith, in loving God, in living for God. Though this God may even allow me to die, though He may slay me, yet I will trust in Him. Yet I will hope in Him. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to desist from loving Him. I will persist. Though He may slay me, yet I'll continue to trust in Him. How I pray that would be our goal. That would be our response. You know what, friends? Persistence wears out resistance. And he persisted to the very end. And the good news is that we are not alone. God is here with us to assist us as we persist. 3 quick words you need to take home. So Job's friends insisted that he must have sinned. We should not insist. Job's wife and Satan, their goal in the midst of suffering was for Job to desist from serving the Lord. We should never desist from serving the Lord no matter what we go through. Instead, we should persist the way Job did.